Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. This is my recap for the anime Deranged Detective. If you like my recaps, please consider subscribing. The story begins as a woman who was a bit too generous with some lipstick, named Amamaya, is furious to hear that there has been a fifth victim and the culprit has the same MO. She urgently instructs her investigators to expand the scope of the investigation, but turns to our protagonist named Totomaro and tells him that he can just go home and sleep. Totomaro portrays a tireless warrior by explaining that he is completely capable of working through 2 nights in a row and he can power through how tired he is. Amamaya doesn't want to be misunderstood and ruthlessly explains that someone as useless as him hanging around will only make things harder. Afterwards, a man named Kiko sympathizes with the discount detective since if Totomaro doesn't show some results soon, he might get kicked out of Investigation Division 1. Kiko reminds Totomaro how much of a garbage detective he is since he was once fooled by a culprit and let them get away 3 times. As if that wasn't bad enough, Totomaro has also had the cops called on him after he went into a neighborhood after dark to get some statements. Kiko likes how earnest Totomaro is, but points out that side of him makes him a terrible detective. Totomaro shows that he isn't a terrible person though, as he points out that all the citizens are terrified with the serial murders going on, and it's agonizing for him to just stand by. The old man clearly has something planned when he strangely licks his fingers to point out that there are already 5 victims, and there haven't been any significant developments in the investigation. Investigation Division 1 is clearly having trouble, so he thinks that there is only one person who can crack the case. This person is a bit of a sleuth, and he is definitely not an ordinary detective. Totomaro goes to the guy's apartment and admires how sleek the sleuth looks in a picture. The sleuth works as the building manager, so Totomaro wonders if it's because his detective business isn't doing so well. Totomaro goes to ring the bell, but is shocked to hear a voice say, "Don't get your hopes up." A second attempt at the bell, and the voice says, "Do it yourself." Totomaro's confusion only upsets the voice since it doesn't like that kind of attitude from someone asking him for a favor. The voice tells him to go back to the shrine and ask the gods for help again. Totomaro has no clue how the voice knew that he did that, and the voice tells him to go away. Totomaro explains that Kiko sent him, which gets the guy to come out, but Totomaro is shocked by his look. This guy has a clump of seaweed where his hair should be and is all tatted up, which is much different from his clean past. Not only that, his eyes are completely dead now. They don't even reflect light anymore, and even a dead fish's eyes do that. Totomaro welcomes himself inside the guy's apartment and wonders if the guy's cat is dead. It's not, and the guy named Komonohashi explains that he went to school with Kiko's son. Kiko is worried that Komonohashi just sits around crying all day, and he can't say it isn't true. Totomaro panics when Komonohashi smashes his face into the ground, but realizes that the floor is covered in cushions. Komonohashi explains that it's his floor of laziness, and it knows his daily routine of despair and boredom. Komonohashi doesn't have a TV, internet, or even a cell phone. Nothing good comes from the outside, so he cut off the world. He is completely withdrawn and claims that he has hit the depths of despair. He tries to get rid of Totomaro so he can continue enjoying his floor of laziness, but Totomaro tells him that he needs something. Komonohashi refuses without even hearing what it is and explains that he isn't the first to come to him. Kiko has sent others to be his partner as well. Young, brilliant officers only interested in promotions. He turned them all away after knocking them down a peg. It's clear that Kiko really wants to help him make a comeback, but Komonohashi reveals that he is not a detective anymore. Totomaro tries to tell him about the murders, but Komonohashi just screams really loudly to drown him out. Totomaro points out that he's trying to say something, but Komonohashi tells him that that's fine since he's trying to keep him from talking anyway. Still not moving a single inch from his glorious floor of laziness, Komonohashi explains that he doesn't want anything to do with unsolved cases and refuses to listen. Totomaro points out that people's lives are on the line, but the floor-loving jerk states that it's not his problem. Totomaro concludes that Komonohashi is way too depressed and there's no way he would be able to deduce anything. Komonohashi is glad to see him leaving and tells Totomaro that he's better off asking the gods for help anyway. Totomaro wonders how he knew about the shrine, and this is where we get our first glimpse of Komonohashi's brilliance. He points out the pine pollen on Totomaro's shoulder and explains that he could only have gotten that from a specific path near the shrine. Totomaro's unopened can of coffee in his pocket and jangling of the change in his other pocket made him realize that Totomaro broke a bill in order to offer a coin to the gods at the shrine. Of course, Todoromaru is amazed by his deduction skills, but Kemonohashi doesn't stop there. The lazy genius uses several of Todoromaru's behaviors to deduce that he was raised by his grandparents. He's also able to tell that Todoromaru is worried about getting fired, which is why he came for help. Kemonohashi, seemingly unable to put a stop to his own godlike detective skills, keeps going, but Todoromaru stops listening since he's already convinced that this way too depressed guy might be able to solve the case. Unfortunately, Kemonohashi continues to refuse, so Todoromaru comes up with a brilliant idea to yell the case details as loud as he can. His genius plan is foiled though when he notices that Kemonohashi has earplugs on. Todoromaru desperately pleads with him, but everything stops when Todoromaru gets a call from his boss. Kemonohashi takes his earplugs out to tell him not to take calls there, but it's too late. Amamiya explains that there has been a sixth victim and their body was found at a park in Shibuya. Todoromaru is the closest, so she rushes him to investigate. He prepares to leave but is shocked as something strange begins to happen to Kemonohashi. Kemonohashi explains that once he learns about a case, he can't hold himself back any longer, but he can't be allowed to solve cases anymore. He states that of course he wants to be a detective. Unraveling mysteries and solving cases is what gives meaning to his life. Not being able to makes him feel like he's going to go insane. That's why he cut himself off from the world, avoided people, and lived as a hermit by being a day sleeper. The problem is that he has a fatal flaw as a detective. A truly troublesome one that no doctor has been able to fix. Todoromaru, showing off his probably not so good detective skills, deduces that Kemonohashi must be sick. His body must be incredibly weak and frail, which is why he made the floor out of cushions. Kemonohashi demands that he leave and states that as long as he takes sleeping pills to knock himself out for 3 days, he will be okay. Todoromaru refuses to leave without him since he doesn't want Kemonohashi to waste his talents and points out that there is nothing more important than stopping criminals. Kemonohashi tries to tell him that that's not the issue, but Todoromaru begs for Kemonohashi to trust him and promises to back him up however he needs. Kemonohashi can't believe how naive he is as he calls him a fool, but does agree to help. However, he tells Todoromaru to listen carefully as he explains that no matter what, Todoromaru cannot take his eyes off of him. Todoromaru, clearly oblivious to what's really going on, promises to push Kemonohashi in a wheelchair if he starts feeling sick. Kemonohashi has no clue what he's talking about and informs Todoromaru that they will be running to the crime scene. The run has Todoromaru questioning his life choices, showcasing his undeniable talent for couch marathons over actual ones, and Kemonohashi explains that he stays fit as a hermit using the gym he built in his apartment. They are informed that the victim was a private investment broker named Okamasa, and he was on his way to a business party the night before. Kemonohashi then shocks everyone when he gets up close and personal with the stiff. Even more strangely, he begins to speak to it. He asks it how it could drown in a place with no water, and why did he hand over his valuables without a fight. The policeman is shocked since Kemonohashi has no knowledge of the other victims, but seems to know a lot about what happened. Kemonohashi explains that corpses want to talk and you just have to learn to listen. The white froth on its mouth indicates the possibility of drowning. Clothes show no signs of struggle, and his suit shows that he was wealthy. The tan line on his wrist says that his watch was stolen. Todoromaru seems to just now realize what a good detective looks like and is amazed to see that he's totally correct. Over the last 9 months, 5 people have been killed at irregular intervals with that exact MO. All their valuables were stolen, but they had no external injuries. Testing revealed no alcohol or drugs in their system, and they were all found drowned in places with no water. Kemonohashi looks at a map showing where the victims were last seen and where they were believed to be going. On it are a date, a celebration, a class reunion, a wedding, and a birthday party. He uses it to narrow down the search area, but Todoromaru points out that there's nowhere in that area with enough water to drown in. Still not realizing that he's terrible at his job, he also points out that he can't even think of a place where a grown man can be drowned without him putting up a fight. Luckily for Todoromaru, Kemonohashi isn't useless like him and has thought of a great place where that could happen. He's glad to see that he isn't rusty, even after a 5-year hiatus, and celebrates with his new friend. Everyone is shocked to see him be so casual with a dead body, but he explains that it's just his style. He states that if you treat them with respect and kindness, the dead will open their hearts to you. Kemonohashi tells them that it's time to go, and shocks everyone once more when he reveals that it's time to arrest the culprit. Todoromaru can't believe that he already knows who it is, since the police investigated for 9 months and couldn't crack the case. The master of deduction explains that that's what he's there for, but Todoromaru still can't believe it took him only like 3 minutes. Kemonohashi calls him Todo and tells him to get out some money as they leave. Moments later, they're at a clothing store where Todo finds himself dressed up like a pimp. Kemonohashi tells the rapper Wannabe that he'll be going undercover as a wealthy man, and they will also have to do something about his hideous head of hair. They go to get him a haircut, and Todoromaru states that he will probably fall asleep since he has worked 2 nights in a row. Kemonohashi is surprised to hear that he isn't the only idiot that has stayed up 2 nights for work, but recommends that Todo should stay awake. Todoromaru begins to think that Kemonohashi might be a bit unstable and wonders if he should really be following what he says. I guess he just ignores that feeling as he heads inside and prepares for his haircut by removing his ridiculous looking coat while Kemonohashi enjoys some black sugar syrup outside. The barber is amazed to hear that Todo has done well in the stock market and has him put his head in a shampoo station. After a moment, the man checks to see if Todo will respond to him, but Todo doesn't say a word. This barber is clearly evil as he begins to fill the basin with water to drown Todo, but Kemonohashi arrives to stop him. He explains to the sinister stylist that lockpicking is a hobby of his, just as Todoromaru emerges from the water. He tells Kemonohashi that he held his breath for a minute just like he told him to do, but he still has no clue what is happening. Kemonohashi explains that he was going to be murdered in a way that only a barber could pull off. The genius detective then reveals his deductions. None of the victims had any drugs in their system, but they didn't put up a fight either. The secret behind this is that the shampoo station was filled with oxygen deficient air. Air with an oxygen saturation below 18. If a person takes a single breath of air when it's less than 10, they faint. This could easily be achieved by using some dry ice. If Todoromaru had breathed in, he would have passed out and drowned. The next clue was that the victims were all men whose hair was growing out. They all had big events lined up like parties and reunions that they'd naturally want to look good for, so going to a barber made sense. This absolute genius of a human being then narrowed things down even further by determining that it had to be a shop targeting new customers, so he focused on places in the victims' overlapping areas of movement that accepted walk-ins. The scene of the crime also had to be somewhere people couldn't see in from the outside, and somewhere you could get dry ice nearby. This guy's barbershop fit all the criteria. Kemonohashi is almost done showing off his 1000 IQ when he states that the barber profession lends itself to chatting up clients so the killer could learn all sorts of things about his victims. To use that against him, Kemonohashi had Todo dress in expensive clothes and tell a story about hitting it big in stocks. He made him play exactly the kind of wealthy walk-in the culprit prefers. The murderous scissor wielder who just stood there and listened to that entire speech just now realizes that they are cops and tries to run. The detectives corner the psycho barber and he explains that he was murdering people for the money. Todoromaru is disappointed to hear he killed 6 people just for money, so the barber explains that he doesn't feel guilty at all since he was screwed over by the rich first. He has crippling debt, but Kemonohashi couldn't care less, and he shocks Todoromaru when he tells the barber to jump off the building. He states that someone who devalues the lives of others has no right to keep living in this world, and instructs him to jump again. Todoromaru can't believe what he is hearing, and we see that something happens with Kemonohashi's eyes that makes the barber agree to do it. Todo is worried that people might listen to Kemonohashi when he makes crazy demands like that, and sees that the barber is actually going to do it. Kemonohashi writhes in pain, so Todoromaru is left to try and stop the man. Kemonohashi seems to snap out of it, and Todoromaru explains that the man jumped. Kemonohashi is completely beside himself as he exclaims that he did it again, and wished he never trusted someone else. However, he's shocked when Todoromaru tells him to stop muttering and help him. Kemonohashi is clearly a genius, but even he can't believe that Todo managed to save the culprit. Kemonohashi wonders if without any hesitation whatsoever, Todo put his own life on the line, but then realizes that isn't it at all. Instead, it's the opposite. Todo's just a pure naive fool, and his body must react before reason kicks in. Todoromaru wants him to stop talking to himself like a lunatic and help him, but Todo ends up falling. Just before gravity can introduce Todoromaru to the pavement below, Kemonohashi saves them both. He proudly announces that he has changed his mind and now feels that there are infinite possibilities. At his house, Todoromaru's mouth nearly drops to the floor as Kemonohashi reveals that his flaw is actually a sickness where he kills the culprit. He explains that he has no conscious memory of doing so, but apparently he always pressures the culprits to their death. By the time he comes back to his senses, it's too late. That's why his solved case rate is an amazing 100%, but his arrest rate is an insanely low 0%. That's why he was forbidden to act as a detective and why he cut himself off from cases. However, Todo has broken his disgraceful streak, and it's clear now why Kiko sent Todamaru. What Kiko must have realized was that Kemonohashi doesn't need some brilliant partner at his side. What he needs is a pure naive fool. Todamaru realizes he is this fool, and Kemonohashi tells him that they will be partners. He tells him to bring every case he stumbles upon to him. Kemonohashi explains that he will let Todamaru take all the credit, so starting today he will be a great detective. A look into the past shows a classroom full of shocked students. They all gasp in amazement when they see that one student managed to crack a case. The murder was a cold case and everyone said it would never be solved. They all agree that the new student is unbelievable, the greatest the school has ever seen, and begin to wonder how he can understand how criminals think. This feat was so incredible that the professor explains that once this student graduates, it could be the end of unsolved cases around the world. We find that this student was Kemonohashi. He was flattered by their praise and stated how devoting himself to becoming a detective was his life's calling. Back to the present, Todamaru goes to see Kemonohashi and is surprised to see that the once sad, depressed loner is now excited to hear what their next case is. He hopes for a case that will send his heart dancing, but there really isn't one. This bad news sends Kemonohashi straight to his floor of laziness, where he mumbles frantically. Todo tells him to speak up, so he does, but it's only to call Todo useless. Kemonohashi tells him that he is wasting his overflowing passion for solving mysteries and the greatest talent Blue has ever seen. He explains that Blue is the world's preeminent detective training academy, and an incredible 100% of the best detectives graduated from there. The best of all of them was Kemonohashi. He had the top scores, and they said he was the greatest genius to ever grace the school. This is incredible to Todamaru, but Kemonohashi explains that something went terribly wrong. During a practical exercise, all of the suspects Kemonohashi went after died, which put him under suspicion. He was expelled from Blue and barred from obtaining a detective's license. A detective's license is a passport he needs to solve the toughest mysteries. Without it, he is not permitted access to any case, and if he breaks the rules, Blue will punish him with death. Todamaru, a genius in his own right, points out that Kemonohashi was just investigating the case he just solved. Kemonohashi says that that was unavoidable, but from now on the surface, Todo will be doing the investigating, while he controls Todo from behind the scenes. Todo likes the idea, but doesn't like the sound of being controlled. Kemonohashi apologizes for his poor choice of words, and explains that what he meant to say was that Todo is his puppet. Things won't be so bad, as Kemonohashi states that all he will do is conceal his identity, go with Todo to crime scenes, and give him instructions. Todo wonders if he could just do that over the phone, but Kemonohashi refuses. He wants to pay his respects to the dead and meet them for himself. His plan sounds great in theory, but Todo explains that he isn't the one who decides who the big cases go to. That's his boss, Amamiya. Kemonohashi, who has practically become one with his beloved floor of laziness, instantly starts doing his genius detective thing on a picture of Amamiya. Todo is in the picture, so he wasn't the one that took it. The reason neither of them are looking at the camera is that it was taken in secret. He is correct, and Todo explains that a coworker who says he wants Amamiya-senpai to step on him sent it to him. Todo reveals that he's scared of Miss Permanent Scowl and recounts what happened earlier that day. A body was found, so she prepared to investigate it, and the always eager Todamaru asked to go with them. Miss Neversmile declined, but gave him something else to do, and put the assignment in his binder. Kemonohashi is surprised to hear that Todamaru is taken seriously enough to have his own binder like the others, but Todo explains that it's just filled with odd jobs or low priority cases. People secretly call it the trash bin. Kemonohashi surprisingly gives comforting words when he states that one day Todamaru will have the last laugh, but instantly kind of ruins it when he hilariously adds, one day the trash man will rule over all of humanity. As for today's trash, Todamaru explains that there was a report about missing money from a piggy bank, and it ended up at Division 1 by some mistake. It's what could be called an utterly impossible crime, but Todamaru assumes that Kemonohashi doesn't seem like he'd be interested in the theft of small change. He couldn't be more wrong, however, as this case surprisingly manages to peel Kemonohashi away from his trusty floor of laziness. Kemonohashi instantly disguises himself and explains that the duty of solving cases everyone else has abandoned falls to him, the most talented man in Blue's history. Todo steps on his seemingly dead cat, but Kemonohashi tells him it's just sleeping. At the scene, Kemonohashi introduces himself as Kamu with Piggy Bank Emergency Services. It seems like Todo wasn't informed of this as he freaks out, telling Kemonohashi to pick a normal name, since if he is found out, then he is a dead man. Just then, Kemonohashi mistakes a pink suitcase for the piggy bank. They note how big it is, and the homeowner explains that it belongs to her older sister who just returned home. She directs them to the living room where we find that Kemonohashi knows way too much about piggy banks. He's amazed by this model as it's the one with a rubber valve from which it is completely impossible to remove coins, the impregnable pig. Toromaru's amazed by his knowledge, but the genius detective reveals that he just used Todo's phone to Google it. The pig isn't the most popular color, and the girl explains that it's all her local store had left. She begins to explain that she noticed it was lighter when she returned home the day before, but Kemonohashi interrupts her when he gets his mustache caught while looking at her older sister's jewelry. Toromaru wonders if he only came to get in the way, but Kemonohashi points out how strange it is that the thief didn't steal the exposed jewelry. That's not all that's weird, as the girl reveals that they were getting a lot of silent calls recently. This makes things incredibly clear for Kemonohashi, which makes Todo think he has cracked the case, but he actually says that he gave up. This is because an impregnable piggy bank in a locked house is truly an utterly impossible crime. Just as Toromaru is shocked to see him chowing down on undiluted black sugar syrup, the older sister arrives. She explains that she was visiting her parents and she thinks that her younger sister is just imagining things. Toromaru thinks that she didn't really provide any new information, so Kemonohashi wonders if they should just chalk it up to a trick of the mind. The little sister becomes frustrated as she is certain she didn't imagine anything, and exclaims that the pig was as heavy as an iron statue before. That's exactly what Kemonohashi wanted to hear, and states that if that's the case, then they should break the piggy bank open. After they do, the girl is certain that there was more change in there, but there's no way to be certain. She goes to count it, but Kemonohashi instantly stops her. He explains that Todo will be sending them to forensics for fingerprinting, and shocks Todo when he says he will be going for a walk. They meet up later just as Toromaru is told that the younger sister's fingerprints were not on any of the coins. Toromaru is shocked to hear that Kemonohashi expected that, but way more surprised to find that they are at Amamaya's crime scene. She reminds Toromaru that he wasn't supposed to come, but Kemonohashi doesn't even address her and shocks everyone when he goes into the crime scene. Kemonohashi finally addresses her, but it's only to ask what she would do if Toromaru solved her case. Angry boss lady will allow him to try, but explains that if he can't make her happy, then he is fired. Kemonohashi doubles down on his shocking behavior by getting up close and personal with the corpse again. He tells it that he is glad to finally meet him and vows to avenge his death. Kemonohashi tosses a bag to Toromaru and tells him that he is up. Moments later, Toromaru addresses everyone and begins by solving the mystery of the piggy bank. Amamaya wants him to just skip that part since petty cases like that have nothing to do with Investigation Division 1. Toromaru is startled, but Kemonohashi quickly retorts that it was a case from Investigation Division 1's trash bin. Toromaru proceeds by explaining that, according to the forensic results, the coins in the piggy bank only have the older sister's prints on them. The older sister assumes that it means that only the money her sister put in was stolen, but that can't be since you can't take money out without breaking it. Toromaru struggles to answer, but Kemonohashi calms him down and reminds him of the little gift he got Todo while on his walk. Toromaru explains that getting the coins out without breaking the bank is impossible, but replacing a broken one entirely isn't. Everyone is shocked as he explains that there weren't fewer coins inside because they were stolen, the previous bank was just broken. And in order to hide that, someone purchased a replacement and put the other coins inside. He accuses the older sister, but she points out that she wouldn't have to hide something like that and would just tell her little sister. Toromaru is flustered again, but Kemonohashi points out to him that his voice is beginning to crack and calms him down once more. The recomposed Toromaru explains that her reason for hiding it is right there on the riverbank. He shocks everyone more as he states that it was a murder. Things really come to light when he explains that the man was her stalker and he was the one making the silent phone calls. He waited for her one day and chased her into her own living room. There was the piggy bank as heavy as an iron statue, so she struck and killed him with it. When she did, the piggy bank shattered and blood got all over the coins. In order to conceal her crime, she bought a new one and tried to fill it with other coins. That's why only her prints are on them. Finally, she brought the body there. She used the suitcase in the entryway to move it. Given its size, it's far too large for just an overnight stay with her parents. Amamaya can't believe the two mysteries were connected, and Toromaru's just relieved that he managed to say everything. The little sister refuses to believe it all, but the older sister crumbles under her own guilt and admits to everything. Totemaru tries to point out how it was the stalker's fault, but Amamiya explains that concealing a murder is still a legitimate crime. Before anyone can even digest what just happened, Kemonohashi shockingly steps forward and tells the older sister to go drown. He states that someone who kills another and hides it has no right to live in this world. Totemaru is stunned to see that Kemonohashi is doing that thing where he pressures criminals to death, and doing it right in front of everyone. Amamiya strangely admires how cool what he is doing is, but Totemaru rushes in to tell everyone that he's just talking to himself. Kemonohashi is still in that mode as he tells her to drown herself in the river, and we see that his eyes have hypnotized her. She rushes off to drown herself, and Kemonohashi can't help but repeat the words "go drown" over and over. Amamiya stops her for a moment, but the girl gets away. The older sister repeats those same words and begins to drown herself. However, just then, our impulsive protagonist acts without thinking at all and dives in after her. After a tense moment, the girl is relieved to see that her sister is safe. Moments later, Kemonohashi snaps back to reality, consumed with guilt when he realizes that he once again pressured someone to take their own life. However, the genius detective is able to find some relief since she is safe, and he has Toto to thank for that. Later, Detective Always Cranky explains to Totemaru that the case has been closed. They found fragments of the piggy bank and the stalker's hair. His blood and prints were also at the house. If they acknowledge that the acts were in self-defense, they may take that into consideration for her dumping his body as well. Totemaru hopes they do, but Amamiya points out that there are more pressing matters, and tells Totemaru that him and his friend violated regulations. Totemaru expects her to completely blow up with rage, but when he lies and tells her that his friend's name is Kamu, she instantly changes her attitude. Later, Totemaru goes to see Kemonohashi and is shocked when he asks for the next case that will send his heart dancing. He says he was just kidding, but it's clear that he wasn't when his body goes completely limp. Totemaru can't help but think that Kemonohashi is really odd. He is obsessed with cases and is unreasonable, so Totemaru never wants to work with him again. Kemonohashi composes himself to tell Toto to hold his head up high, since for a pure naive fool, he did incredibly good work. Toto accepts yet another backhanded compliment, and thinks that, despite all of Kemonohashi's flaws, Toto still has a part of himself that is hoping for another difficult case. A part that's looking forward to Kemonohashi's deductions and the thrill of solving a mystery. Kemonohashi wants to mark the day a special occasion, and shocks Toto when he states that it's the day his puppet was born. Elsewhere, Blue's principal, Emi, is asked if she remembers the man named Kemonohashi. Of course she remembers, as he was the man with the highest marks in the history of Blue. She is told that he has been suspected of resuming detective work. The instructor of disguise wonders if that may be the end of unsolved cases as they know them in Japan, but another instructor reminds him that all of the culprits in the case he handled died. They all fear that Kemonohashi may give rise to yet another tragedy, which is why they expelled him and barred him from obtaining a detective license in the first place. The principal makes her decision. Blue's entire goal is to train detectives to ensure that justice is never overshadowed by evil, so they cannot have a detective who kills people. For this reason, she orders an investigation of Kemonohashi, and the menacing-looking tracking instructor volunteers to do it. The principal makes it very clear to this guy that looks like he has bad intentions that their goal is nothing more than to verify the intel they received. She fears that if they agitate Kemonohashi, then it will only give him the opportunity to escape. She tells the tracking instructor to refrain from direct contact as much as possible. Even if he catches him in the act of sleuthing, he is to report back first. Kemonohashi is in great danger as the principal explains that if they find that he is acting as a detective, they cannot allow another tragedy to happen again, and he will have to be punished to the greatest extent. Meanwhile, Totemaru receives a call and urgently rushes to Japan's version of Walmart with a cat mascot. Foolishly, he expected an emergency, but is shocked to find that Kemonohashi is just upset that they won't let him start a tab, and Kemonohashi just wants Toto to pay for his stuff. Totemaru thought that Blue was after Kemonohashi's life or something, but Kemonohashi points out that it's much worse than that. His cat's life is on the line if it doesn't get some food in its belly. Totemaru can't believe Kemonohashi has survived this long without shopping for himself before, but Kemonohashi explains that people from the apartments bring him things. The two are given a ticket for a raffle where they need to spin a wheel to decide their prize. Seemingly forgetting about his probably already dead cat, Kemonohashi gets really into it. He thinks they should play rock paper scissors to see who spins the thing, but Totemaru just lets him do it. Totemaru couldn't be less enthused, but Raffleman can tell Kemonohashi's going to get something good since he's raring to go. Kemonohashi gives the thing a good turn, and the man loudly announces that he has won the grand prize, a hot spring vacation. This guy says it's perfect for the two of them since it's a couples package, but Totemaru's the only one that tries to correct him. Kemonohashi decides that he will just go by himself twice, but that's not how it works. They have no choice but to go together. Kemonohashi registers himself as Camu, and Totemaru as the pure naive detective, much to Toto's disliking. They leave, but we see that the tracking instructor has already found him, and now knows about the hot spring vacation. On their way there, their driver gives them a pamphlet of the inn, and he explains how lucky they are since it was pouring rain the day before. He also tells them a charming story about how long ago, fall leaves on the mountain turned a certain crimson called Beni. A lord saw it reflected in the hot spring, and that's how Benizome Hot Springs got its name. Totemaru begins to change his mind about the entire thing, as everything looks very beautiful and extremely relaxing in the pamphlet. However, Kemonohashi tells the driver that they won tickets for the annex building, and the man's tone completely changes as he apologizes profusely. He gives them a different pamphlet that's just for the annex building, but Totemaru is shocked to see that it's just some hand-drawn junk. The man drops them off near the annex building and leaves faster than when my dad went to get the milk. They quickly realize why when they see that the annex building looks pretty run down, like a typhoon hit just this one spot. They are welcomed by the inn owners and their purple-haired employee, who is actually the tracking instructor in disguise. The guy that looks like he washed his hair with grape juice thanks Totemaru for his service with the police force. Totemaru has no clue how he knew his job, and the man explains that it was because of Totemaru's shoes. The leather of the toes are scuffed, and that only happens if you run all out in them. The only professionals who run in their leather shoes are police detectives chasing down criminals. Totemaru is amazed by his deduction, but Kemonohashi doesn't want Toto to be fooled. He explains that when it comes to professionals running in leather shoes, he points out that a reporter might be just as likely. Kemonohashi out-deduces the other guy, as he is determined that he only knew Toto was a cop because that is what Kemonohashi put on the reservation form. We see that old purple hair is actually impressed, but he just explains that it's a little welcoming trick he likes to do. Inside, the man explains that the bath is open anytime up until 8 AM the next day, and dinner will be served later at 7 PM. Kemonohashi can't stop deducing the heck out of everything, and realizes that with the dinner at a predetermined time, that must mean other guests are there as well. He is of course right, as there are 3 other parties there. The two head to their room, and we see that the instructor is strangely excited. He is amazed by Kemonohashi's deduction, as it confirms that it's really him. Very soon after, the guys enjoy a bath, but Kemonohashi wishes it was crimson like in the driver's story. He reveals that the driver's story is just what they tell the public, but there is also a secret legend. The river there often overflows, and this caused problems for the villagers. The brilliant villagers decided to sacrifice a young lady to it, and the next day the floodwater went away. However, they say that for days afterward, the river and hot spring ran crimson. Totemaru is in disbelief of the terrifying story, and Kemonohashi explains that it was in the handmade pamphlet the driver gave them. Just then, Totemaru notices that Kemonohashi's tattoo is bigger than he thought. Kemonohashi explains that it's actually a scar. He once suffered injuries all over his body, but that was the only one that scarred. It looks like a number, and Kemonohashi says that is why he likes it so much. It looks like the number 6, which is a number he associates with his birth. To help Toto understand, he compares it to Toto having a tattoo of his grandma since he loves her so much. Afterwards, they go to dinner where Totemaru is shocked by the clump of slime Kemonohashi ordered. Kemonohashi has to explain to the uncultured simpleton that it's rice covered in his beloved black sugar syrup. The genius credits it with being the source of his brain power and explains that he also drinks black sesame paste to ward off anemia. Kemonohashi then turns his attention to the other guests. There is a couple there where an impatient man wants his wife to admire the delicious meal, and a young man by himself. Kemonohashi, only using 1% of his power, points out how they were told that there were 4 parties staying there in total, so it seems someone has yet to arrive. However, Toto is surprised when Kemonohashi says that 5 people is just perfect for something he has planned, and even more shocked when he reveals that it's the Game of Life board game. Playing the Game of Life at a hot spring is strangely on the list Kemonohashi made during his 5-year seclusion, so Totemaru is terrified of what else might be on that list. Kemonohashi surprisingly wants everyone to play, but Totemaru explains that everyone is still eating, and points out that it's more customary for people to play ping pong at hot springs. Kemonohashi agrees to wait on the fun for a while, so the two finish up their meal. Afterwards, they head to play a quick round of ping pong, where Kemonohashi finds an old scroll that tells the secret story of the Crimson Hue. This thing is pretty creepy looking, and Kemonohashi wonders if the death of a young woman really did dye all the waters red. They prepare for their match, but Kemonohashi wants to up the stakes, and decides that whoever loses will have to be the winner's slave for life. Kemonohashi isn't just a genius, he also has a powerful ping pong serve that Todo ends up sending straight through a window. Unfortunately, they only had one of those, so they head outside to retrieve it, but it's too cold and its mission failed. Kemonohashi points out that he won, so Todo is his slave now. His first task is to steal unsolved case files from the station, but that's impossible. We then see that the fourth party has arrived late to the hot springs. Surprisingly, it's Police Superintendent General Amamiya, but she has made a grave mistake. Afterwards, the boys find that Amamiya had won second prize at Japan Mart and point out to her that she walked into the men's bath. She is worried that Camu might think she is a pervert, but her embarrassment is spared when the woman in the couple yells out that she wants a divorce over something her husband said. He tries to tell her it was a joke, but she isn't buying it. The nosy Amamiya cries out that they shouldn't get divorced, but becomes upset when Totamaru wonders if she is drunk out of her mind. She heads to bed and the woman has calmed down a bit. Her husband recommends that she take a bath, so she agrees and apologizes for yelling. She leaves him there to just relax, giving our brilliant detective the perfect opportunity to ask the husband if he wants to play the game of life. The man agrees, so Kemonohashi asks the lonely guy if he wants a do-over on his very obvious tedious life. Todo asks him not to be rude, but the kid agrees to play anyway. Some time passes as Purplehead diligently checks the time, and the boys are in middle of an intense game of life. Kemonohashi is in last place, but he explains that that's only because he's playing fair this time. The young loner explains that he wishes they could really do their lives over this way, and so does the guy with the old ball and chain. It's pretty late, so they decide to call it a night, and leave the married guy with the most money to clean up since he is rich. They leave, but something isn't right as the instructor once again checks his watch. The next morning, a scream can be heard throughout the entire place. Amamiya is told by one of the workers that there's a dead girl in the women's bath. Everyone arrives shocked to see crimson leaves in the bath, along with the dead body. It's the man's wife named Sachiko, and her husband arrives shocked since he thought she was sleeping. Amamiya can tell from the rigor mortis that her time of death was sometime between midnight and 2 AM. If you thought her going into the bath was shocking, Kemonohashi one-ups her and gets up close and personal to the corpse like he always does, and promises it that he will avenge it. Kemonohashi points out that there aren't any obvious external injuries, but something clearly isn't right. Amamiya explains that there weren't that many fallen leaves there the night before, and the worker points out the obvious as the crimson layer on the water is like in the story. She thinks it might be a curse. Kemonohashi pretends to wonder this too, but explains that Detective Totamaru just can't stop doubting people. He gives Totamaru a hint to do his thing, so Totamaru goes straight into detective mode. He asks if anything strange was noticed between the hours of midnight and 2 AM, but the owner explains that the inn is small, so they take turns on the night shift. Octopus Head reveals that he had the night shift last night. He was watching over everyone so he can provide a statement. He points out how they all saw the same thing. Only one individual returned to their room before the wife left for hers. Everyone is shocked when they remember who that was, and Purplehead looks right at Detective Amamiya. The others can't deny that she left and begin to think that she is the murderer. Our brilliant detective knows better though and confidently states that it wasn't her. However, it is someone else who is right there with them now. The others push back a bit since she was clearly the only one to have left. Kemonohashi points out that it's true that Amamiya is the only one with an uncertain alibi, but her doing it is impossible. He is certain of this and he plans to prove it to them right now. Old Purple Hair gives a menacing look and is surprised to see that his chance to catch Kemonohashi investigating has come so soon. He is the great tracking instructor from Blue and declares in his mind that Kemonohashi is done for. He is then shocked when Kemonohashi reveals that everything he was just saying about solving the case was actually coming from Totamaru. Todo wishes he wouldn't get carried away, but Kemonohashi doubles down and puts on an absolute show. He pretends like Todo is telling him that they already have all the clues they need. In a panic, Todo can hardly form any words to say and just makes gasping noises. However, Kemonohashi takes those noises and makes them seem like clues about the illustration of the secret of Benezomi and the water turned red with leaves. Everyone is familiar with the secret story about the girl that was sacrificed, everyone except Amamiya. Everyone else saw it in the taxi on their way there, but Amamiya didn't take a taxi, and Totamaru realizes something. Kemonohashi pretends that he's just following Totamaru's lead and explains that Amamiya never even had the opportunity to see the pamphlet, so she didn't know the story. Therefore, she could not commit a murder made to replicate that story. This is why she isn't the culprit, and our brilliant detective makes sure to give all the credit to Totamaru. The others are convinced since that story is kept a secret and there's no other way she could have known about it. Amamiya breathes a sigh of relief, but Squidhead is disappointed that Totamaru was actually the one that made all those deductions. Kemonohashi then asks Totamaru who the real culprit is, but he wasn't prepared for that at all. Kemonohashi just makes it seem like Totamaru hasn't decided yet, and he wants to say it with just some curse. The inn worker says that it could be since she saw a strange white mist rising from the river just after dinner. She thought it might have been a spirit, and Kemonohashi calls Totamaru over. Toto thinks that he wants to show him a clue that will surely break this case wide open, but Kemonohashi just found their ping pong ball. Totamaru wants him to focus, but Kemonohashi just wants to look for something to get the ping pong ball. They are surprised to see a random bath mat, and still all our genius detective can think about is if it can reach his precious ping pong ball. Amamiya interrupts them, and Totamaru is certain that she's going to yell at him. However, she surprisingly thanks him for helping her, but it's pretty clear that her body is physically refusing to thank him, as it looks like her head is going to explode. She can't continue the investigation herself because of the doubt, so she leaves the rest to Totamaru. Toto is incredibly honored, but she reminds him that she doesn't expect anything good from him, it's just that he is the only one there. Amamiya says that nothing has been going right for her, and it all started when she walked into the wrong bath. This makes Kemonohashi realize something, and he compliments her on her good work. He tells her that she actually wasn't mistaken that night, but Sherlock's Riz hits harder than a tranquilizer dart, and she passes out. The police arrive, and purple-headed Four Eyes gives our boy a dirty look before they all return to their rooms. The tracking instructor goes into the room next to Kemonohashi's and plans something devious. Some time passes as the cops do their thing, and we see that Squidhead is trying to listen in on Kemonohashi through the wall with a noise-amplifying device. Totamaru arrives and explains to Kemonohashi that according to the medical exam, the cause of death was heart failure. According to her husband, she had a long-hanging heart condition. Purple Hair, with the thinnest eyebrows you will ever see, creepily listens in and desperately waits for Kemonohashi to say something that proves he has been investigating. Seemingly knowing everything, Kemonohashi says that there is a caterpillar on the wall and gives it a good whack, completely blowing up the instructor's ears. Toto points out that there was no bug, and Kemonohashi says of course there wasn't, he would never kill a bug anyway. Totamaru gets serious again and explains that he was told that the temperature difference between the inside and outside caused the heart failure. It was thermal shock. This is exactly as Kemonohashi expected. He states that everything is coming together now and tells Totamaru that he is up. Everyone gathers once more, and Totamaru declares that with the police's blessing, he will now solve the case. He reveals that it was definitely a murder, and the person who did it is there now. Totamaru gets right to it by pointing out that the murderer had to have known that the victim had a weak heart, so it had to be the husband. He admits to knowing about her condition being her husband and all, but says that he would never think of hurting his wife. Besides that, he points out that he was in the lounge with everyone else at the time of her death. Totamaru acknowledges this, but accuses him of only being with them so he could have an alibi. His real goal though was to set a very bold trap to lure his wife to her death. Totamaru then demonstrates how the husband left a bath mat covering the entrance to the bath to create a pitfall. Amamiya furiously points out that no one would fall for such a dumb trap, but Totamaru reveals that without her glasses, the wife had really poor vision. The bath mat was more than enough to fool the blind bat, and the trap made her fall into the bath. A bath she would never stop soaking in. The worker points out that it was thermal shock that actually killed her, and just falling into bath water isn't enough to stop a heart. Totamaru agrees, but then reveals that the bath wasn't actually filled with warm water in that moment, and it was actually freezing water. This is shocking as it's a free-flowing hot spring, so Totamaru has his assistant Kemonohashi retrieve something that has the husband shaking in his shoes. It's a rain gutter that he found discarded in the river. The husband knew there was an elevation difference between the river and the bath, so he used two rain gutters. One drew the water from upstream into the bath. Then by drawing the hot water from the bath into the river, he was able to create a freezing cold spring. That also explains the white mist the worker saw. It wasn't a cursed spirit, it was just good old science, since it was steam from the hot bath water hitting the cold river. The only hitch in the husband's plan was that the fallen leaves in the river from the heavy rains 2 days ago ended up in the hot spring. He couldn't pick out each individual one, so he decided to make use of the secret legend. He doubled down on the fallen leaves by adding more and tried to make it look like the curse of the sacrificed woman. The husband reaches for his last defense and reminds everyone that she died in the women's bath. A man couldn't sneak in there long enough to set all that up. Totamaru has an answer for that as well, pointing out that if the husband knew no one would be coming, then that wouldn't be a problem. At dinner, the husband overheard that Toto and Kemonohashi were going to play ping pong, so he knew no one would be in the men's bath for a while. He used that opportunity to swap the curtains marking the men and women's bath to send the ladies to the men's bath, ensuring that he would have the women's bath to himself. This also explains why Amamiya walked into the men's bath. Their ping pong match ended more quickly than the husband expected, so they went for a bath before he could swap the curtains back, and she walked in on them. The husband can't believe he is being accused and points out that there is no evidence. Of course, Todoromaru has a response to this as well, as he reveals that if they test the curtains, he is sure they will still find the husband's fingerprints. Those fingerprints have no reason to be there. He should have only been using the men's bath, so why would his prints be on the women's curtain rod? Todoromaru challenges him to explain his way out of that one, but the man can't and he says he has been checkmated. Todoromaru is just glad that he got all that out, and the husband turns to the worker to apologize for failing. She is shocked to see that he really ended his wife, but the man explains that he did it for her since she always said his wife was in the way. Amamiya is furious at the lowlife since he let the dark force of his simpness control him into ending his own wife over an affair. Everyone argues but are then shocked when the normally very calm Todoromaru loudly yells that the man ended his own wife. The man has no words left and is taken away. Todoromaru wonders where Komonohashi is and goes to look for him after he sees something weird. Todo checks the forest and is called over by Instructor Squid. Todo can hardly recognize him after his glow up, and the man explains that Komonohashi is just waking up. Todoromaru is then shocked to find Komonohashi tied up on a tree. Komonohashi thought that he was just in a hot spring filled with black sugar syrup, so Todoromaru must explain to the sugar lover that he was just dreaming. Purplehead finally introduces himself as Blue's tracking instructor named Spitfire. He reveals that he came to investigate whether Komonohashi was acting as a detective. Komonohashi mocks Spitz as he reveals that he spotted him all the way back at the store when they won the raffle. Komonohashi confidently points out that he didn't do anything and Todoromaru was the one that cracked the case. Spitz calls him a liar and hilariously says that a fool like Todoromaru, who didn't even notice him, couldn't possibly make such brilliant deductions. Todoromaru's pride is destroyed and Komonohashi tells Spitz to show him some proof. Spitz of course doesn't have any, but says he doesn't need any, since he is certain those were Komonohashi's amazing deductions. Komonohashi really starts antagonizing the guy now. He says that not only is Spitz bad at his specialty, shadowing and tailing, he is also illogical, and Komonohashi wonders how he became an instructor. On top of all that, he is a terrible kidnapper, just tying him up in a forest for anyone to see in broad daylight, and Komonohashi wonders how bad instructors are these days. Spitz doesn't seem to understand the situation, and tells Komonohashi that if he admits to investigating, he will ask for a lighter sentence. Komonohashi points out that Spitz definitely doesn't have the authority to do that, and begins doing his genius deducer thing. He points out that if Spitz were only there to see if he was investigating, he wouldn't need to disguise himself as a worker at the inn. However, Spitz still went through all the trouble of going undercover and interacting with them. If he was just there to observe, that would be very irrational. Not only is he exposing himself to his target, there's always the possibility that they might flee. Given Spitz's earlier threat, his phrasing, and his impatience, our big brain million IQ genius deduces that something else is at play. And it's a personal matter. Spitz either made a bet with someone about him investigating, or he was threatened. Komonohashi frees himself and wonders if there is a third reason. Perhaps Spitz is in need of his abilities. Spitz has taken enough of a beating from all the deducing, and admits to being utterly defeated. He desperately pleads for Komonohashi to lend him his skills. He explains that he only honed his tracking skills enough to become an instructor at Blue, so that he could find the best detective to solve the mystery of his missing family. Unfortunately, no one there could help him, and everyone he asked thought that only Komonohashi might be able to solve the case. Spitz is ecstatic that he was able to confirm that Komonohashi is the detective he had always been looking for, but Komonohashi refuses to help. Komonohashi points out that Spitz is an instructor at Blue. He doesn't even know him, so only a fool would trust him. Spitz explains that he is a pretty good guy, and he now feels really close to Komonohashi after investigating him for so long. Spitz is determined to prove his trustworthiness, and states that he will go tell his superiors that Komonohashi isn't doing any detective work. He says that he will help Komonohashi with his detective work as well, but Komonohashi reminds him that it's Todoromaru's detective work. Spitz shows that he is a fan as he offers a happy coat to Komonohashi. Komonohashi rejects this dude again, and Todoromaru tells him that Spitz doesn't seem like a bad guy. He wants Komonohashi to hear him out, so Spitz tells Todo that while he is not smart, he definitely has heart. He compliments Todo on solving the case, and leaves while telling them that he is available if they ever need a tracker. He takes off like Spider-Man, while stating that he will definitely earn Komonohashi's trust. Komonohashi is clearly going to turn him down, but does admit that Spitz's skills would be helpful in solving future mysteries. Komonohashi is intrigued by the missing family case, but he explains that he simply can't trust Purplehead, and if he betrays him, he is done for. However, Komonohashi trusts Todoromaru's judgment, and Todo said he was a good person. Todo thinks that puts too much pressure on him, but Kemonohashi says that they will simply have to see if he's trustworthy or not. Just like for everything else, Kemonohashi has a plan, and shocks Todo when he explains that he will just use spits until he drops. Todoromaru knows that Kemonohashi isn't a bad guy though, as he has never seen him abandon someone who's in trouble. Todoromaru thanks him for helping Amamiya in the murder case, but he says that he was merely fulfilling his duty. However, the next scene shows a guy looking in his fridge as he makes a menacing smile. Sometime later, Todoromaru is told that serial murders have been occurring and there will be a joint investigation. He is shocked to hear that some super skilled detective they call Eagle-Eyed Kawasami will be coming. Todoromaru fanboys over him for a second as he points out that this great Kawasami has a chance to become Superintendent General in his 20s. This upsets Amamiya though, as she is aiming to be Police Superintendent General also. She then surprisingly reveals that Todoromaru will be overseeing the joint operation, but the rude boss then mumbles under her breath that it's only because she would never lend Kawasami any of her best men. Kawasami arrives and we get to see just how insane this guy is. He uses a pair of tweezers to go around the room telling everyone their flaws. One guy's nails are too long, another guy has a button falling off, and some guy has his fingerprints all over his glasses. Kawasami spares no one during his inspection rampage, and he even plucks the hairs off a guy's face. He finishes up the group and states that chaos is the enemy of work. Todoromaru is amazed and Amamiya seems annoyed as she points out that not a single thing can get past Kawasami's eagle-eyed checks. We learn that she has a little bit of a past with this guy, but that ended when they stopped working at the same location years ago. Kawasami then turns his attention to Todoromaru, so Todoromaru nervously prepares for the eagle-eyed check of his life. Kawasami's check is brutal as he has determined from his years of experience that Todoromaru is so unsuited to be a detective that it's tragic, and he has zero aptitude. Amamiya and Kawasami just stare at each other for a good second, and he finally points out that there is a bit of dust on her shoulder. Amamiya isn't having any of this fool's nonsense though. This ruthless boss blocks his little inspection tweezers and warns the guy she calls scum that if he even tries to touch her, she will slit his throat. Kawasami's tool is all busted up, so he calls on his trusty partner Yamane to give him a fresh set. Kawasami compliments Yamane as his right-hand man, and the humble guy just says that he's glad to be working with the greatest detective in history. Amamiya explains that Todoromaru will be the person she sends for the joint investigation, and our boy gets roasted as they go back and forth about how she is only doing that to spite Kawasami. Kawasami just acts like he can't even see Todoromaru, and Amamiya points out how Todo should start appreciating her as a boss since at least she acknowledges his existence. At the crime scene, we learn that a truck driver found a dead person's body in his cargo. Todoromaru arrives and is horrified to see that the victim's hands were cut off. Todoromaru tries to cooperate with the other detectives but just ends up being completely ignored, like he really doesn't exist. He realizes that he's probably just a hindrance to someone as great as Kawasami, but our boy refuses to just stand by and watch. This is some refreshing confidence, but he doesn't know what to do now. Fortunately, Kemonohashi appears from nowhere in a subtle disguise. Todoromaru points out that no one asked for his help, but Kemonohashi knows that Todo was at a loss because he always flaps his lips when he thinks to himself, so he is easy to read. Kemonohashi makes his presence known to everyone and explains that he is a consultant in all matters involving hands. He then shockingly introduces himself as Tekemoma Komomi, the great hand puppet master. His card seems pretty legit and Kawasami assumes that Amamiya sent him, but Kawasami doesn't want some random civilian getting in the way. Kemonohashi assures him that he isn't just some civilian and tells Kawasami not to hold back as he clearly has something to say. Kawasami instantly breaks out his tweezers to test how accurate Kemonohashi's hand puppets are and is shocked to find that they are pretty realistic. Kemonohashi explains that he insisted the maker of the puppet change the material because he too is a lover of accuracy. Apparently, Kawasami is impressed because he allows Kemonohashi to accompany him. Kemonohashi is impressed as well, so Todoromaru explains that Kawasami is the great eagle eye because he sees through everything in an instant. Kemonohashi's admiration instantly turns to competitive rage as he crushes his poor puppet's face, and he states that no matter what, they have to catch the culprit first. Todoromaru says that will be impossible because they aren't telling him anything about the case, but Kemonohashi decides to go right to the source. Yamane explains that this case follows the same MO as 3 other murders. The perpetrator ends his victims with a single stab to the heart, and then for some reason, he severs their hands and takes them with him. This is some pretty creepy stuff, so they call him the Hand Collector. The puppets think the name is pretty cool, and Kemonohashi gets excited about the terrifying case that not even the Great Eagle Eye has been able to solve. Yamane explains that he and his amazing partner Kawasami were informally questioning one of their suspects the night before. They were certain that this man was the Hand Collector, but he put up a huge fight and fled into an abandoned factory. There were only 2 ways in and out of the building, so they split up to catch the guy. Yamane found the culprit first and managed to handcuff him. Yamane hesitates to tell the rest of the story, so Kawasemi arrives to reveal that the culprit managed to shake off Yamane. Kawasemi arrived just after, and the culprit came barreling towards him. Kawasemi reveals that he couldn't stop the guy, so that is why he must be the one to close the case. Totamaru points out that they already know what the culprit looks like, so it won't be long before the guy is captured. This is true, but Kawasemi reveals one big problem. The man they believed to be the hand collector last night is now the handless corpse sitting before them. Our boys are shocked, and Kemonohashi determines that the real hand collector must still be out there somewhere. He then does that crazy thing he does where he chats it up with the corpse. He points out how the guy is dressed lightly considering how cold it's been, and determines that he must have been ended in a heated room. Kemonohashi then notices a tiny tattoo and incorrectly guesses that it's a piece of kelp. Yamane is quick to explain that it's actually a bird, and says that he saw it when he handcuffed the guy. Kemonohashi becomes very concerned about something urgent, but hilariously just says that he can't get the puppets off. Kawasemi is disappointed to see that nothing came from the puppet master jumping into the truck, and tells him to just go home as he has no time for games. Afterward, Totamaru tries to help him get the puppet off, but wonders why Kemonohashi came in the first place. Kemonohashi then gives a little smile as he easily releases the puppet, and Totamaru goes flying into Yamane. Kawasemi scolds Toto for the chaos, but Kemonohashi screams out how amazing Totamaru is. He states that everything is just like Toto said it would be. It's very clear now that Kawasemi is lying. Kemonohashi uses this moment to explain that Kawasemi will not be the one to solve the case. It will be the pure naive fool, Detective Totamaru. Of course, Kawasemi is upset at the accusation, and he asks Totamaru for proof. Kemonohashi explains that Totamaru barreled into them on purpose to see how quickly Kawasemi reacted, and Kawasemi didn't disappoint as he easily dodged him. Kemonohashi then points out that with such exceptional reflexes and physical agility, there's no way a handcuffed culprit would ever get past Kawasemi. Kawasemi is shocked to hear that Totamaru ran at him on purpose, and realizes now that he is the subordinate of Amamaya's that he has heard of, the one that has been brilliantly cracking cases lately. Kawasemi admits to lying and explains that Yamame did handcuff the culprit, but he was actually the one that allowed him to get away. Kawasemi wasn't even present for it at all. Kemonohashi wants to know why he lied, so Kawasemi strangely begins his explanation by saying that on that day, Yamane was missing a button on his sleeve. Yamane is an outstanding subordinate, but the grotesque serial murders have been taking a serious toll on his mental health. Because of this, Yamane made a mistake when the pressure was highest in a very crucial moment. Kawasemi explains that he was fully aware of his subordinate's mental state, but failed to give him appropriate guidance. For this reason, he took full responsibility. That is why he covered for Yamane and said he was the one that let the culprit get away. Yamane feels the intense guilt and apologizes. Kemonohashi's annoying little puppet breaks the tension and points out that Yamane is missing a button on his sleeve again. Yamane realizes this and absolutely loses his mind. He looks for it frantically like a maniac and determines that it must have fallen off when Totamaru ran into him. His desperate search continues, but the duck puppet reveals that he found it, and it has given him the gift of vision as his new eye. Yamane is able to find relief as he exclaims that at least he was able to find something this time. Kemonohashi strangely thanks him for saying that, and adds that we only realize what's most important after it's gone. He then makes a phone call, and Totamaru is shocked to hear that it's Spitz. Kemonohashi had Spitz look into a bunch of stuff, so Spitz reveals that the body in the truck is a guy named Minoru. Spitz is at his place right now, and says that it's unreal. If there were a world competition for hand obsession, this guy would represent Japan and be guaranteed a top place. The guy even kept his collection refrigerated. 3 people's worth of hands, proving that the man in the truck is indeed the hand collector. Kawasemi is curious about what all that was, but Totamaru has a hard time explaining. Luckily, Kemonohashi shoots his delicious black sugar syrup all over Totamaru to break the tension and take Totamaru to get cleaned up. However, as he leaves, Kemonohashi shockingly reveals to Kawasemi that when they get back, Totamaru said that he will solve the case, and the duck tells him to look forward to it. In the restroom, Kemonohashi silently explains everything, and Totamaru shows great determination. When they return, Kawasemi condescendingly states that he will humor the nonsensical ramblings of a rookie detective. Totamaru says that the guy over the phone was a police officer, so the guy in the truck is definitely the hand collector. However, Yamane is quick to point out that the guy's hands are missing too. Totamaru says that was done to make them think there's another hand collector, and it's the work of a copycat. That's already pretty clear to Kawasemi, so he wants to know why someone would go through all the trouble of imitating such a brutal murder. Totamaru then really drops the hammer as he reveals that the culprit didn't murder anyone. The real hand collector that is in the truck just took his own life. The hand collector stabbed himself in the heart, splattering blood on his jacket sleeves. In order to make his death look like a murder, someone removed and hid his jacket. That is why it seemed like he was dressed so lightly. The reason he took his own life was because once he was cornered by the two detectives, the serial killer had no choice but to accept his fate. Kawasemi, the great detective, is completely shocked and realizes that if everything is true, then the guy took his life in the abandoned factory. He is then horrified as he points out that he and Yamane were the only other people there, and that could only mean one thing. Todamaro says that it's exactly the case and reveals that the person in question was the first person to find the hand collector after he took his own life, and that is Yamane. Yamane tries to deny it, but Todamaro really goes into detective mode now. He points out that it must have been pitch black in the factory at night, so it would have been impossible to see anything. Todamaro also says that the hand collector's tattoo is very difficult to see in the first place, and asks how Yamane instantly knew it was a bird. Yamane still frantically tries to deny it, so now Todo reveals that Yamane is hiding something else and can't get himself to tell Kawasemi. Todo puts everything out there and shockingly reveals that Yamane had lost his handcuffs. He was able to determine this when he noticed that after Yamane lost his button in front of them, he panicked and said, "I found it this time." In other words, he already lost something important to him, something which might compromise police integrity. That is why Yamane was so on edge that day. So when he found that the hand collector had killed himself, Yamane came up with an idea. To make it seem like the hand collector fled after he handcuffed him, he hid his body, then he severed his hands. That way, when the body was found handless afterward, it would look like the hand collector had taken the cuffs along with the hands. No one would ever find out that Yamane lost them. Kawasaki instantly jumps to Yamane's defense, saying he would never do such a thing, but Todamaro stops him and explains that he is part of the problem. It's obvious how much Kawasemi values Yamane, but the pressure of being valued by such an uptight perfectionist meant that Yamane couldn't allow himself to be any less than ideal. Kawasemi is actually speechless, and Yamane desperately apologizes for leaving a stain on Kawasemi's career. Yamane is completely broken and explains that the responsibility was too much for him to bear. He couldn't meet his expectations. Kawasemi explains that it will be difficult to reinstate him as a police officer. However, he isn't a terrible person and says that as long as Yamane has the will, he will be waiting for his partner to return. After Yamane is taken away, Kawasemi points out that there's no need for both members of a team to be police officers, and uses our boys who just solved the mystery as an example. They are shocked, and Kawasemi reminds them not to underestimate his eyes. He tells Todamaro that just like he needed Yamane, the puppet master needs Todamaro to harness his full ability. Komonohashi is impressed by this point, but Todo jumps in to point out how much of a mess Komonohashi is without him, and the two bicker for a bit. Kawasemi watches them, impressed by Todamaro, and thinks about how Amamaya has a good detective on her hands. Sometime later, Todamaro goes to see Komonohashi, but finds him in super messed up shape with bloodshot eyes. Komonohashi is eager for another mission, but has become addicted to television, and one show in particular called Psychic Abilities Fact or Fiction. We then watch a live broadcast of this show, hosted by a woman named Ono. On the show, a psychic and a neurosurgeon go head-to-head in an attempt to verify psychic powers. The one demonstrating their power is a famous psychic named Toraj, and up against him is the genius neurosurgeon Mofu. This girl is fast asleep, and Todamaro wonders if she is severely injured because of all the bandages. Mofu explains that she was just cutting an apple, but the knife got away from her and did some serious damage. Komonohashi explains that this girl is very odd, but she is a lot of fun to watch. Of course, Todamaro wonders if she's really a good neurosurgeon, so Komonohashi explains that her procedures are very precise, and she is considered a super doctor. However, she proves to be very clumsy, as the audience breaks out in laughter when she accidentally clips her microphone to her face. The crowd marvels as Toraj explains that he will demonstrate how he can control someone's mind with just writing, and Komonohashi cheers him on. Todo is surprised to see that he believes in psychic powers, but he actually doesn't. Komonohashi just thinks that it would make solving crimes way more fun and challenging if it was real. Toraj plans to force someone to perform an action against their own will, and he does this by first offering to give someone $10,000 if they can resist doing what he tells them. They put headphones on a volunteer from the crowd, and Toraj writes the word jump on a card. The second the man sees the word, his body begins to act on its own and he starts to jump. The crowd erupts with applause, and Toraj shows the man the next card that says run. The man begins running against his own will, amazing everyone and making them wonder if Toraj really has psychic powers. Komonohashi is a brilliant genius though, as he has noticed something, and he wonders if the neurosurgeon has noticed it as well. Mofu buzzes in and reveals that she used a nap to track the walking patterns of the volunteer. This volunteer's walking pattern is identical to the previous volunteer that the psychic had, so she determines that this so-called volunteer is actually a plant. He wasn't really chosen at random, and he is the same subject from the psychic's last demonstration. It was all staged, and she shows everyone the proof on her broken phone. Toraj says that these are all false accusations and begins writing a word that will prove that he is not working together with the volunteer. Toraj writes the word death on a card, meaning the guy will have to die if he reads it. Everyone is startled, but Mofu doesn't believe in psychic powers and is certain that this will not take his life. Toraj shows the man the card and he instantly collapses, horrifying everyone. Everyone begins to panic as the show is cut off and Kemonohashi tells Todoromaru that there is no time to waste. They arrive at the scene where Todoromaru is told that they have confirmed the man's death. The police wonder who Todoromaru's friend is, and Kemonohashi introduces himself as Kamoji, a superfan of the psychic. Kemonohashi wastes no time in getting up close and personal with the corpse and once again promises to avenge them. Kemonohashi pretends to be Toraj's fan, but Todoromaru wishes he would just get serious. Kemonohashi then rudely asks Toraj how he murdered the guy, and he simply says that he did it with his psychic powers. Everyone is shocked that he would openly admit to murder, but he points out that he can't be held responsible under the current laws. Todoromaru confirms this as he can't arrest someone for a psychically induced death, and Kemonohashi just continues his act as a superfan. He asks Toraj for an autograph and tells him to just use the pen he used in the demonstration. Toraj signs the tiny book, but the ink is so thick Kemonohashi can barely read it. As Toraj leaves, he blames the neurosurgeon for everything. He says that if she had just believed in his psychic powers, then the death demonstration wouldn't have been necessary. He thinks that if anyone should be punished, it should be her. The guys go to check on her, and a girl named Shikata introduces herself as Mofu's assistant at the hospital. Todoromaru doesn't think it was her fault, but Mofu explains that she is a practitioner of medicine, and she takes full responsibility for allowing someone to die right in front of her. Kemonohashi asks her if this incident made her believe in psychic powers, but she isn't sure. What she is certain of though is that the man died because of poison. Her examination reveals that it was some kind of neurotoxin, like blowfish poison or snake venom. Kemonohashi already deduced this as well, referring to a speck on the back of the victim's neck as it might be a mark left by a poison needle. She wonders if Kemonohashi is a doctor, but is heartbroken when he reveals that he is a Toraj superfan. Todoromaru wonders if Toraj could have used some sort of blow dart to insert the needle, but she rejects that idea. She watched Toraj closely and he didn't do anything suspicious. On top of that, no one was standing behind the victim either. She freaks out as her brain can't explain what happened, and Todoromaru actually begins to wonder if it was psychic powers. Kemonohashi refuses to break character as he celebrates Toraj's victory, but Shikata explains that Mofu has a personal reason for not being able to lose. This reason is why Mofu rushed there right after surgery, and why she even participated in such a crazy show in the first place. Kemonohashi doesn't even need to hear the reason, and just determines that it's even more of a reason to solve this absurd case. He vows that they will figure out the trick and see the fake psychic off the stage. Everyone is shocked as he removes his disguise, and he reveals that it obviously wasn't psychic power. He shockingly reveals that he was really just a bandwagon fan all along, and the only thing he is a true fan of is the truth. He points out that just after the subject saw the cue card, he closed his eyes and collapsed. However, he wonders if something happened after. Mofu reveals that while she was giving him CPR afterwards, the subject came to for just a moment. He was in distress and then his breathing stopped again. Todoromaru is certain that Toraj couldn't have inserted any needles during the CPR and explains that forensics haven't found any needles. Todoromaru is becoming more certain that it was psychic powers, but Kemonohashi says they already have all the clues they need. Mofu notices that his eyes are pretty messed up and gives him some eye drops. Todoromaru then gathers everyone and shockingly reveals that he's ready to solve the mystery. He has them reenact the entire scene, Mofu as the victim and himself as Toraj. For accuracy, Todoromaru uses the same cue cards and he asks Toraj for his pen. Toraj resists and wonders why he should even participate in such a spectacle. Mofu is furious as she points out that someone just lost their life and asks him nicely for the pen. Unfortunately, she is super clumsy and trips over a cord. Toraj's pens fall on the floor, so she takes it and apologizes as they're going to use it no matter what. They prepare and Todo explains that he will write on the card and Mofu will pretend to do what it says just like the plant did. Toraj objects to him calling the guy a plant and points out that no one would be willing to take their own life for a trick. Todoromaru starts with the word jump, so Mofu gets to jumping. He writes the word run, so she runs. People watching are getting upset since she is just doing it because he told her to, and they wonder if the detective is just wasting everyone's time. Todoromaru then shows her the word death and everyone freaks out when Mofu collapses to the ground. Todo calms all these dummies down and explains that she isn't dead. He reveals that when Toraj showed the card to the subject, he actually turned the card upside down. When the word death is turned upside down, it spells sleep, so the man was actually still conscious when he collapsed and was just pretending to sleep. The headphones kept him from hearing the commotion, so he kept up the act even as Toraj took his pulse. This means that Toraj injected the man during the commotion and when the broadcast stopped airing. Mofu is shocked since this means the poison was just starting to take effect when she was giving him CPR. Todamaru reiterates that no psychic powers were used, and he directly confronts Toraj. Toraj is furious and points out that they haven't found a poison needle, but Todamaru shockingly reveals that they have. He explains that the reason why Toraj used his thick pen to sign his signature in such a tiny book was because he had the poison needle hidden in his thinner pen. Everyone is shocked, but Toraj insists that he really does have psychic powers and plans to prove it to everyone. He loudly says the words Toraj psychic powers, but nothing happens. Finally, he just admits to lying and gives up. He then goes on a tirade revealing that the subject was beginning to threaten him. The subject was going to spill the beans on their fake trick unless Toraj gave him 90% of their earnings, so ending his life was his only choice. Just then, Kemonohashi tosses Toraj the poison pen and shockingly tells him to take his own life. This is because anyone who dismisses the lives of others has no right to live. He tells Toraj to stab himself, and Todamaru instantly realizes that Kemonohashi is doing that thing again where he forces someone to end themselves. Our hero springs into action to knock the pen away, but everyone is horrified when they see that Todamaru was stabbed in the hand. Kemonohashi comes back to his senses, but is concerned for Todo. Mofu rushes to help him, but it's too late. He has the mark of the poison needle. Something isn't right though, and Toraj explains that he swapped the pen tip with the needle, so there's no way that it could have left a mark. That means that he didn't have the right pen in his hand, and luckily the poison pen was just one of the other ones on the ground. Afterwards, Todamaru explains that he really thought he was dead, and Kemonohashi apologizes for what he did. Todamaru doesn't really believe him and is certain that Kemonohashi will be ready to investigate the next case. Something is different this time as Kemonohashi doesn't make a smart comment as usual, and he simply says that it was a mistake for him to start investigating crimes again. If things had ended differently just then, there would have been no way to undo it, so Kemonohashi thinks that he has no right to be a detective. It's clear that Kemonohashi is really down on himself, and Todamaru wonders if it's time that they give up on this really dangerous approach. Just then, Todamaru hears Mofu call for help and finds that the clumsy girl has her bandages caught on something. When freed, she thanks Todamaru for solving the case and reveals the reason why it was so important for her to win. In the past, she had several patients that believed in psychic powers way too much and would refuse surgery because of it. Now that they have disproved psychic powers just a bit, thanks to his brilliant deductions, it will save a lot of lives. These words completely re-energize our protagonist, so he thanks her back and apologizes for Kemonohashi scaring everyone at the end. He explains that Kemonohashi has a weird habit of pressuring murderers into doing things, and the neurosurgeon seems interested. When he leaves though, she thinks about how what Kemonohashi did was definitely more than pressuring. Afterwards, our re-energized protagonist finds Kemonohashi and tells him that he can't just quit after something like that. Kemonohashi is quick to point out that he almost got Todo killed, but Todo reminds him that it was just an accident. Kemonohashi can't accept that though, and explains that if that happened again with the worst outcome, then he wouldn't be able to live with himself. Todo is certain that he will stop Kemonohashi next time, and he tells him that he should have some faith in himself as well. Todo really has his attention now and points out how much Kemonohashi loves investigating. He likes helping people, and people's lives are at the core of everything he does. Todo seems to have gotten through to him, and he shows Kemonohashi an invitation that he got earlier that day. Todo doesn't know the person who sent it very well, but it's for a gathering at an observatory on a remote island to watch a meteor shower. Todamaru thinks they need a change of pace, and Kemonohashi agrees that it could be a good idea to get away from mysteries for a while. On top of that, this remote island is actually famous for its black sugar syrup, and Todamaru can't believe that it's the real reason why Kemonohashi has agreed to go. Sometime later, we see that Kemonohashi and Todamaru are on their way to the remote island. The guy who invited them says that he has a friend in some police department, and Kawasemi told them that Todamaru is one of the best detectives around right now. Kemonohashi wonders why a top detective would be invited to a meteor shower viewing party, and the man explains that it's so they can be prepared for anything. The man mentions an incident that occurred on the island, prompting Kemonohashi to ask for more details. He instantly stops himself though, since he is there to relax and get away from cases. Kemonohashi struggles to keep himself from asking more questions, so Todo just says that he is a bit tired. The man isn't too worried since he just asked him to come as insurance, and he is confident that nothing bad will happen. They finally reach the island, and the man explains that farmers will come from the main island during harvest season to pick sugarcane. However, it isn't harvest season yet, so it's just the observatory staff and the guests staying there. Kemonohashi still has questions, but this time, it's about his precious black sugar syrup. The man confirms that it's made from the sugarcane there, so Kemonohashi signs up for 3 meals a day of the highest quality black sugar syrup. Our boy Kemonohashi is really in vacation mode, as he also states that he would like to try hula hooping after eating. Strangely enough, hula hooping at an observatory is on the list he made during his 5-year seclusion. They arrive at the observatory and are instantly curious about a gun on display in the lobby. The man explains that it's a replica that is supposed to ward off evil spirits. The guys are impressed since it's indistinguishable from the real thing, but are curious about the evil spirits. Long ago, in order to protect the sugarcane, residents kept a flintlock as a charm. The guys walk past all the guest rooms on the 2nd floor to the observatory room where they find a really angry chef named Duno. With the dome closed, the place is soundproof, so she was just relieving some stress. When something really sets this lady off, she goes there to scream real loud. She complains about how some guest named Donzawa was really angry about how the stars weren't correctly positioned on his coffee cup. Even worse than that though, there's some guy requesting an entire meal of black sugar syrup. Kemonohashi points out that it's for him, so she apologizes, and things get pretty awkward. The awkwardness is ended when Toromaru is shocked to see what Donzawa's hair looks like. This guy is super weird as he explains that his haircut was scientifically designed so as not to get in the way when he looks through a telescope. Donzawa calls them impure guests, which means they are people who can't appreciate the shower. People who aren't astronomy fans. Some photographer lady is there as well, and she introduces herself as Onodera. It's pointed out that there's another non-astronomy lover guest among them, and Kemonohashi surprisingly calls this guy his sensei. He is the Blue Detective Academy's closed circle theory instructor named John Grizzly. John is one of the very few instructors that Kemonohashi recognizes as his superior. John wants to know why Kemonohashi is there, and he simply says that he is there on a gourmet journey. The man that invited them there is named Jumanji, and he explains to everyone that he invited Toromaru and John there to make sure there is no trouble. Kemonohashi thinks it's pretty strange to invite renowned detectives there, but Onodera explains that it's the least he can do after the gut-wrenching incident that happened there. Kemonohashi desperately tries to tell her that he isn't interested, but Toromaru's quick to point out that his actions and words aren't matching. This is because Kemonohashi's holding his hand to his ear like he's trying to listen for more. Kemonohashi then acts like Toromaru's the one that wants to hear more details, so she can continue explaining. John reveals that 10 years ago, the director at the time and 6 others were gunned down. Jumanji reveals that the one that died 10 years ago was his father. The gun used was never found and the killer remains unidentified. They considered shutting down the observatory, but Jumanji's father loved the place with all his heart. He is certain that overcoming that tragedy is what his father would want, so that is why he is hosting the viewing party for the same meteor shower. Everyone encourages him, but some random blue-haired chick pretends she has a tear in her eye after hearing his story. Her name is Orihime, and she introduces herself as the idol of the constellation Orion. Just then, the director is shocked as the dome begins to open without permission. Kemonohashi just couldn't help himself, and the director explains that the telescope automatically tracks the position and records footage of any stars entered. They won't be using it to observe the shower though, since just using the naked eye captures the beauty of the shower the best. The meteor shower doesn't start till 11 PM, so everyone is welcome to enjoy the buffet until then. Moments later, Toromaru finds that Kemonohashi has already seated himself, and is shocked to see that he has covered everything in black sugar syrup. The guy with the silly haircut explains that Kemonohashi has charmed them all, since he is a pure astronomy maniac. Kemonohashi explains that he learned about astronomy a while ago, and Toromaru just now realizes that he doesn't know much about his secret detective partner. Toro then wonders if John knows about Kemonohashi's illness, and if he might have a hint about how to cure it. Toromaru approaches him, and John surprisingly asks him if Kemonohashi has been doing any investigating. Toromaru lies right through his teeth by saying no, and explains that he knows that Kemonohashi ends up pressuring the perpetrators. Toro doesn't know the details though, so he asks John to tell him if Kemonohashi really pressured culprits to their own deaths. John begins by saying that 5 years ago, Kemonohashi took part in a hands-on training exercise. Kemonohashi amazingly succeeded in locating the base of a group of 7 killers. But when police entered the stronghold, they only found Kemonohashi standing there, dazed and covered in blood. Murder weapon in hand among the corpses of all 7 murderers. It became known as the Bloody Training Incident. There's a 99% certainty that Kemonohashi did it, but he had no memory of what happened 30 minutes before or after that. For this reason, he was considered to be of unsound mind at that time. As such, barring him of his detective license was the extent of his punishment. However, this intense guy says that Kemonohashi is lucky. because if he had been in charge of deciding Komonahashi's fate, then he would have given him the death penalty. Just then, Orihime frantically tells Toromaru to stop Komonohashi. Todo goes to check what the extremely urgent matter is, but finds that it's just a very stuffed Komonohashi trying to keep himself from puking while hula hooping. Komonohashi explains that he was really just demonstrating the orbit of planets in a solar system. He is happy to have achieved his goal, but is tired and heads to bed. He decides that he can just see the meteor shower in his dreams, and his new diehard fans admire the deep thought. A while later, the meteor shower begins, but Toromaru notices that Onodera isn't there. She apparently went to get photography equipment, but it's been 2 hours since she left. The dome begins to open for some reason, and everyone rushes off when they hear a gunshot. The door to the telescope is locked, so the director runs to get the key. John desperately tries to ask if anyone is in there, and the director returns as he wasn't able to find the key. They break down the door to find that it's pitch black and the lights don't work. Uno brings them some flashlights and they shockingly find that Onodera and Komonohashi are both on the floor. Thankfully, Komonohashi is still breathing, but unfortunately, Onodera is no longer alive. John is furious at himself since he should have predicted this, but Toromaru hopes that he doesn't think Komonohashi is responsible. The others point out how it was obviously Komonohashi since the gun is right next to him. The chef suspects him as well, since only a psycho would order so much black sugar syrup. Komonohashi then shockingly speaks as he defends his favorite food by saying that black sugar syrup did nothing wrong. He explains that he woke up to Orihime screaming. He doesn't remember anything after going back to his room and lying down on his bed. However, he can deduce from their conversation that he is in a very bad situation right now. Everyone wants him to be arrested, but John silences everyone and points out that they are all suspects too. John looks at every incident fairly, so Komonohashi points out that he is truly an instructor who embodies Blue's lofty ideals. Komonohashi asks John and the renowned police detective Toromaru to investigate this case thoroughly. Todo remembers that he has to investigate too, and John tells Komonohashi to remain quiet and watch. John points out that the body is still warm, which means she was only very recently deceased. The bullet struck her heart directly through the back. An autopsy will confirm everything, but it's safe to say that the gunshot was the cause of death and the gun was the murder weapon. The gun was the one on display in the lobby, but the director never could have imagined that it was real. The lights in there are strangely all broken. There is also no ladder, so escape through the dome would be impossible. There are no other exits, which means that no one else could have done it other than Komonohashi. There is undeniable evidence against him, which is the same as 5 years ago. There is no other way in or out of the room, but the door was locked. So inside the observation dome was a perfect locked room. Komonohashi can't believe that the locked door makes him the culprit, but he then shockingly finds the key in his pocket. It's the only master key they have, but Komonohashi has no clue why it would be in his pocket. Everyone is certain that he is the culprit, but Toromaru points out that Komonohashi has no reason to hurt anyone. John has made his decision though, and tells Toromaru to arrest Komonohashi. Toromaru begins to refuse, but Komonohashi is okay with it, as long as Todo is the one arresting him. Todo wants him to defend himself, but Komonohashi has nothing to say. John has Toromaru bring Komonohashi his shoes, as walking through all the broken glass would be dangerous. John has the director call the police on the main island, as a proper investigation is still necessary. Everyone thinks that the place is cursed, but Jumanji's just glad that they found the culprit, and he thanks John. Toromaru handcuffs Komonohashi in another room, and Komonohashi explains that his memory stops at collapsing onto his bed. When he opened his eyes, he was already in the observatory dome, along with Onodera, who he apparently ended. Toromaru wonders if it was the same feeling from the bloody training incident, and he says that it is exactly the same. Komonohashi has really started to believe that he is the murderer, since he can't remember anything. Toromaru gets furious as this isn't like the Komonohashi he knows, but Komonohashi points out that Toromaru doesn't have any proof of his innocence. Toromaru counters this by saying that the victim was just an ordinary person, and the only people that Komonohashi has tried to pressure to death have always been murderers. Komonohashi is shocked, and Todo further proves his point by saying that he has never once tried to end the life of an innocent person. Toromaru then proclaims that even if Komonohashi isn't sure about his innocence, he is sure about it. Komonohashi snaps out of it and says that Todo's words have warmed up his frozen brain just a little. He says that he just remembered something and reveals that he has been keeping a secret from Todo. This secret is that he is completely useless with a gun. He always earned perfect scores in every other subject, but not marksmanship. He failed for never being able to do so much as graze a target. Onodera was shot directly in the heart, but Komonohashi says that even if he had 1,000 tries, he wouldn't have been able to land a single shot. Todo is shocked and wonders why he didn't mention this before. Komonohashi explains that ever since the incident 5 years ago, he always told himself something. If anything like that ever happened again, he would just give up without a fight, no matter how hard it was to accept. He resented everyone after that day, so it was the only way he could keep himself sane. Komonohashi thanks Todo for helping him snap out of it, and explains that his brain is now working at 1%. Todoromaru realizes that if Komonohashi isn't the real culprit, then someone framed him. The person is still out there, so he rushes off to investigate. Komonohashi remembers that he cried and screamed when he was arrested 5 years ago, and wonders why he isn't now. However, he realizes why he isn't panicking this time, and that's because he now has Todo. Heavy rain pours outside, and Jumanji almost has a heart attack when he finds out that police won't arrive until the next morning or even later. Todoromaru returns to the crime scene and shockingly discovers that all the lights in the room were shot out with a gun. They were all hit dead center, so it definitely couldn't have been Komonohashi since he is no marksman. Several bullets were fired, but they strangely only heard one from outside the dome. Todo tries out chatting it up with the corpse like Komonohashi does, but he just ends up freaking out. He then remembers that the telescope automatically makes recordings of stars, and he wonders if it recorded any clues. Todoromaru checks the computer, but is startled when someone sneaks up behind him. It turns out to just be John, who thought Todo was an intruder. John is looking for more evidence against Komonohashi since he wants to make sure that he gets the death sentence this time. John reveals that he has already interviewed everyone, and Todoromaru realizes that this old tough dude is way ahead of him. Everyone says that Onodera was last seen at 11 PM, and she went back to her room for photography equipment. However, John thinks that it was odd that she wasn't prepared already, considering the weather was supposed to be bad later that night. The shot heard at 1 AM was definitely the one that sent her to the afterlife, but everyone has an alibi. Jumanji was hanging out in his office for a short time at 11:30, but returned to the roof by midnight. Donzawa was on the roof the entire time, besides one trip to the restroom at midnight. Uno the chef was in the kitchen from 11 PM to 1 AM. When the gunshot was heard, she was talking to Orihime, who had gone to get drinks. Orihime is some kind of e-girl, so she started live streaming to all her simps at midnight, and when it ended at around 12:40, she went to the kitchen. She and Uno were together when everyone freaked out about the gunshot. Todo was on the roof, so the only person without an alibi is Komonohashi. Todoromaru is certain that Komonohashi is innocent, but John points out that he is not being logical. Todo quickly points out though that he is not the logical one, and that is Komonohashi's field. John has never heard anyone speak about Komonohashi the way he does, and Todoromaru says that it's because they are truly friends. John is amazed since this means that Komonohashi has changed a lot. He used to never let anyone get close, but he now has a friend that trusts him against all logic. Todo then shows him the bullet holes and what he found on the computer. A recording started at 11 PM, but it was completely black until 1 AM. From then, it only recorded the North Star. Todo thinks it's irrelevant, but John realizes something and gets really upset at himself for not noticing sooner. He gives Todo the key to free Komonohashi and instructs him to tell Komonohashi everything. Komonohashi definitely isn't the culprit, but there's no time to jump for joy as they have to catch the real criminal as soon as possible. John urges him to be careful though, since no backup is coming. Police are being held back by a typhoon, and John fears that more killings will happen. Todo frees Komonohashi and catches him up on everything. Komonohashi reveals what John figured out and points out that shooting multiple lights in a darkened dome is impossible. This means that the lights must have been shot either before 11 PM or after 1 AM. There were 7 lights, but only one shot was heard at 1 PM, so all the other lights must have been shot before 11 PM. This means that glass was all over the floor before 11. Komonohashi was found barefoot, so if he walked in there in the darkness, his feet would have been covered in blood and cuts. He couldn't have moved even a single step from where his body was found, but there was a giant telescope between him and the victim's body. From that position, he wouldn't have been able to shoot her. Komonohashi is reinvigorated and is ready for the fun part. He reveals that the extreme sleepiness he felt after dinner was actually due to sleeping medication that was put in his black sugar syrup meal. Todoromaru foolishly assumes that it was the chef, but the brilliant detective points out that everyone had plenty of opportunities to drug his meal. Komonohashi wants to put solving the crime aside for a moment so he can enjoy some fun time. Todo has no clue what he is talking about, so our genius protagonist reveals his plan to drink some syrup that doesn't actually have sleeping medicine in it. John racks his brain trying to figure out the real culprit and discovers a piece of fishing line. Komonohashi dives into his secret stash of black sugar syrup and credits it for powering his brain to 100%. Komonohashi thought they might find a clue of whoever dragged him out of bed while unconscious, but everything has been completely wiped down. This only makes him realize that the crime was prepared very carefully. It wasn't a crime of opportunity, and Kamonohashi must have been targeted for framing early on. Todo explains that John was planning to apologize the next time he saw Kamonohashi, and Kamonohashi explains that this is exactly why he respects John so much. Todo thinks that John is actually a really good guy too, and reveals that John wants to reinvestigate Kamonohashi's blood training incident. Syrup goes flying everywhere as Kamonohashi can't hold in his excitement, and he can't wait to thank John. The fun ends very soon though, as a gunshot is heard and John's body falls outside their window. John lies outside alone and exclaims that it's a trap for Kamonohashi. Kamonohashi arrives soon after, but it's too late, John is gone. Toromaru is stunned, and Kamonohashi emphasizes how serious the situation is since John was an instructor at Blue. Blue is the world's foremost detective agency, so for one of its instructors to meet their demise, their opponent must be very formidable. Kamonohashi makes his promise to avenge his sensei, and Toromaru vows to help him. Our genius protagonist then begins his 300 IQ deducing. John's clothing shows no sign of a struggle, so he was shot from a distance. Either that or he was cut off guard. Kamonohashi notices the fishing line, and others arrive to the scene. They instantly assume Kamonohashi did it since he's supposed to be handcuffed, but Todo jumps to his defense. Kamonohashi takes care of it though, and explains everything really quickly. The same gun that was used on Onodera was found on the roof, and it seems like the culprit took it from John, who confiscated it. Everyone is terrified, and Toromaru goes over everyone's alibi. Jumanji was resting in his office, and Donzawa just finished up important business in the bathroom. Uno was asleep with earplugs, and Orihime was using earphones to check the sound of her livestream to her desperate simps. This unfortunately means that no one has a good alibi, and anyone could have put the bullet into John. Everyone is frightened as someone among them is the cold-blooded life-ender. The police won't be showing up anytime soon, so Donzawa fears that the tragedy from 10 years ago will repeat itself. He thinks that the island really is cursed, and freaks everyone out when he exclaims that they're all going to be found as corpses. Kamonohashi calms everyone down as he proclaims that that won't happen. He says that while Toromaru might not look it, he is actually really enraged. Kamonohashi seems to be talking about himself, but tells everyone that Toromaru loves mysteries more than anyone, and he's good at solving them. Unfortunately, he fell into a trap, and now 2 people have lost their lives right in front of him. One of those people he respected a lot. Kamonohashi explains that the culprit is there hiding behind a mask, and smiling with triumph. This person will regret their actions soon, however, as they have enraged someone that they never should have. Todo and Kamonohashi reinvestigate the first crime, and Todo demonstrates how they got through the door. Kamonohashi seems to realize something, but asks Todo how he thinks the culprit managed to turn the dome into a locked room. The master key was in Kamonohashi's pocket, and he was locked inside. Toromaru thinks that the culprit must have used some kind of tool, and remembers the fishing line. He assumes that they must have used it by running it down from the gap at the top of the door, attaching it to the key, and turning it from the outside. Toromaru is pretty proud of himself, but Kamonohashi tells him he is wrong. Todo thought that he finally made his first deduction, but Kamonohashi points him toward the door's edges. Todo is shocked when he realizes that the fishing line couldn't go through any gaps because there is adhesive on the side of the door. There is enough on there that not even the thinnest fishing line could fit through it. Toromaru can't understand why someone would lock and glue it, so Kamonohashi reiterates that their adversary is truly formidable. This just makes them even more worth defeating, and Todo can't believe how happy Kamonohashi looks. Todo keeps explaining what happened after that, but Kamonohashi has already moved on to the corpse. From her location, the only thing she could see was a vent, but no one could have entered or exited through there. Kamonohashi has Todo turn off all the lights, and Todo takes a second to let his eyes adjust. Toromaru realizes that Onodera collapsed in front of the switch to open the dome. The dome opened right before they heard the shot, so she must have hit the switch and got eliminated right after that. Just when it seemed like he was deducing his way to victory, Toromaru loses it. Everyone has an alibi for Onodera's shooting. The dome was completely locked, so no one could have ended her in there. Todo gets really serious as he fears that even Kamonohashi might not be able to solve this case. However, he turns on the light to find that our boy is challenging himself to see if he can hula hoop in the dark. Todo assumes that he has given up, but Kamonohashi shows him that the fishing line got caught in his hula hoop. Todo panics as it's an important clue, but Kamonohashi explains that what he has done is an important key to solving the mystery. Todo is completely lost, but Kamonohashi reveals that he has already solved the case, and all that's left to do now is to find the culprit. Todo catches a stray hula hoop to the face, and Orihime arrives as she was looking for Toromaru. She was worried that the typhoon would cause a power outage and she wouldn't be able to get Sims to give her more money. Orihime asks for a flashlight and explains that she already asked Uno. Uno apparently was really upset since everyone was making her take flashlights all over the place. Kamonohashi realizes something about the flashlights and compliments Orihime for giving them the last piece of the puzzle. Kamonohashi explains that it's Toromaro's turn now and it's time for them to launch their counterattack. A while later, Toromaru gathers everyone so that they can arrest the murderer as quickly as possible. Everyone is stunned since this means that he has solved the case, but they all thought he was a stupid idiot. Our protagonist strikes fear in all those that doubted him by explaining that the culprit is in this very room. He starts his explanation with John's unfortunate end. Toro explains that he and Kamonohashi both saw John fall outside their window. If they didn't see him, then they would have went straight to the roof because that's where the gunshot was heard. Strangely though, someone else came to the street as well. Not only that, but this careful murderer didn't bring an umbrella. The reason being so they could hide the fact that they got wet on the roof when committing the murder. Toro then stuns everyone when he reveals that the culprit is Jumanji. This dummy has just been caught but tries to say that he would never do such a thing. He gives the typical excuse of saying that he accidentally thought the gunshot came from the street, but no one is stupid enough to believe him. His next defense is that he was with Toromaru when Onodera was shot, but Toromaru has shockingly already solved that case as well. Toro explains that Jumanji only pretended to be in his office watching AniCap videos. What he really did was use some sleep medication to knock Onodera out and dragged her to the dome. He already shot the lights out earlier and put Kamonohashi on the ground after using the same nighttime medicine on him. Jumanji slipped the keys in our boy's pocket and put some finishing touches on the doors with some Flex Seal superglue. The stupid lunch lady questions our boy's brilliance since she clearly remembers that the doors were locked from the inside. Toromaru explains that this was the most brilliant part of the deranged killer's plan. Jumanji gave Onodera a lighter dose of the sleeping medicine, so she woke up and went looking for the light switch because it was pitch black in there. The lights were all broken thanks to the genius criminal, so she went looking for the exit. Unfortunately for her, the doors were glued shut, but she didn't know that and tried to unlock them. She turned the key, but what she was actually doing was locking the doors. The others finally begin to believe the brilliant detective, but the guy with the mushroom haircut is freaking out. The door locking explanation is solid, but he wants to play backseat detective, and he points out that Onodera was shot in that locked room. He wonders how someone could have shot her at that point and who did it. Toromaru has it all figured out and explains that the evildoer anticipated Onodera's next move after locking the door. Everything became clear after finding the fishing line that was left as a clue by John, who is now solving crimes in heaven. Jumanji tied one end of the string to the top of the telescope and the other end to the trigger of a gun hidden and secured inside the air vent. The only thing that was illuminated in the room other than the light switch was the switch to open the dome. Onodera thought she was being smart since opening the ceiling would bring in starlight and she could call for help. Unfortunately, she is dumb, and what actually happened is that the telescope moved to record a star it was programmed to follow. The telescope pulled on the string and the string pulled on the trigger. The gun was aimed perfectly and she was shot. The stupid Jumanji refuses to give up and points out that the gun was found next to Kamonohashi, not in the air vent. Toro reminds them that the gun they found was the one from the lobby, but the real gun was taken from the vent when everyone entered the dome and was distracted by Onodera's dumb, lifeless body. Jumanji's life-ending spree didn't end there, as he used the same gun to finish off John. Jumanji seems to really lose his mind at this point and questions why anyone would think he would commit these crimes. He demands answers, but our boy Toro won't be pushed around, and reminds this future prisoner that he's the one asking the questions. Toro points out that before they even opened the doors to the dome, Jumanji told the lunch lady to get them flashlights. However, the only person that could have known the lights were out was the person that shot them. This stubborn idiot finally breaks and admits that he has lost. Jumanji doesn't regret what he did, and the psycho even doubles down by saying that Onodera deserved it. Jumanji then reveals her secret. She wasn't really a photographer. Onodera was actually a journalist who specializes in unsolved cases, and she was snooping around looking for clues on what happened 10 years ago. Jumanji realized it immediately. The night of the shower, Onodera went to rummage through his room, so the psycho had to take care of her. Kamonohashi finally says something and shocks the guy when he points out that this must mean Jumanji has a dark secret from 10 years ago. Kamonohashi is right, as Jumanji is just spilling all the beans at this point and reveals that he hid the same gun from 10 years ago in his room. On that day, his father used the gun to eliminate all the guests and staff, then himself. Jumanji was the first to see the massacre, and he knew he had to hide it all because of the shame it would bring. Jumanji just wanted to live the rest of his life in peace, and for some reason thought he could do that by committing cold-blooded murder. Jumanji wishes that John would have just blamed Kemonohashi for everything, but he didn't, so he had to send him to the afterlife too. Just then, we see that Kemonohashi has gone unconscious again and demands that Jumanji console the dead with his own death. His eyes do that mind control thing, but Totoro jumps in to stop the rogue justice from happening. Kemonohashi comes back to his senses, but Jumanji is a complete lunatic. He refuses to let Kemonohashi take his life and plans to handle it himself by ingesting a pill. Kemonohashi knows that it's some kind of self-life ending pill and tries to get Jumanji to spit it out. Kemonohashi's sad attempt at the Heimlich maneuver doesn't work, but he tells Jumanji that he still has a ton of questions he wants to ask him. He wants to know why he was chosen to be framed and why he was chosen to come to the island in the first place. Jumanji reveals that Kemonohashi was of course part of the plan from the beginning. He eerily says that no matter how much Kemonohashi struggles, he is still dancing in a certain person's palm. Kemonohashi demands to know who the person is, but this guy just says the words "night turns to dawn" and catapults his worthless life right out of his stupid body. Kemonohashi demands answers, but he isn't getting any more confessions out of a corpse, no matter how good of an interrogator he is. The next morning, everyone is relieved to hear that the police will finally be coming, and they only had to wait till 3 people died. Kemonohashi is still upset though. He was part of Jumanji's plan from the start, and the jerk used his pure and innocent love of black sugar syrup to lure him there. Jumanji even framed him in front of a blue instructor and trapped him. Kemonohashi questions who Jumanji could be, and if he's just someone else's lackey, then who is this other person? Just then, Kemonohashi recalls the corpse's final words, "night turns to dawn." It just so happens to be dawn now, so Kemonohashi opens the ceiling. Kemonohashi seems to discover something by doing this, but Totoro interrupts with the police. One of these late to the party cops seems to notice something and is surprised by his superior. Nearby, Toto finishes up asking Orihime some questions. She compliments him on being a star detective, and this delusional girl blasts out of there with her comet dash. Afterwards, Toto explains that all the bodies were retrieved and the police boat has departed. Kemonohashi explains that he has huge regrets and never would have believed that John would be leaving in a body bag. He reminds Totoro about how he said he would stop investigating from now on, but takes it all back. The fact that this incident resembles his past so closely is no coincidence. Just like in the bloody training incident, Kemonohashi woke up at the scene of the crime with no memory of it. That's not the only similarity though. Kemonohashi reveals a picture he took of Onodera's body with morning light shining in. The picture is startling as a mark around her corpse is in the same exact shape as the scar on Kemonohashi's neck. He couldn't see it when it was dark, but it's very clear that it was drawn with red ink before she was shot. Kemonohashi somehow never realized it before, but all the clues point to the same thing. Nothing like the bloody training incident happened before or ever since. He only started pressuring criminals to take their own lives after that day, and it's also when his scar appeared. All this points to him being framed for the bloody training incident. Kemonohashi has devoted his life to deduction, and the person pulling the strings stole 5 years of investigation from him. This mysterious person grew tired of waiting for him to realize it in his grief, so they come up with a crime that had several elements from 5 years ago and invited Kemonohashi to it. It's almost as if this person is declaring that they are way more intelligent than he is. It's like they're laughing because they're holding his life as a detective in their hands. Kemonohashi can't stand it since it's like this person is playing games, and it's the greatest humiliation of Kemonohashi's life. Worst of all, they use his precious black sugar syrup against him, so he vows to never forgive this person. Aboard the police boat, one cop is alone and Jumanji shockingly emerges from his body bag. He is relieved that he just managed to escape death and credits the cop with helping him. Jumanji had no clue that he would be able to fake his own death the way he did and once again credits the cop. The cop applauds him on behalf of a certain family and Jumanji's ready to begin his new life. Onodera was close to discovering the truth, but this family contacted Jumanji just in time. This family is called the legendary House of M, the pinnacle of the criminal underworld. It's said that all crimes pass through the House of M, and any crimes they commit are guaranteed to go unsolved. They are the greatest family in the history of crime, and Jumanji can't believe that one of them is standing before him. The cop is humble about all the praise and just wants to know how Kemonohashi behaved. Jumanji explains that once Kemonohashi figured out he was the culprit, his personality completely changed, just like the family said it would. Jumanji gets frantic and explains that if he didn't fake his own death, then Kamonohashi definitely would have forced him to. Jumanji continues his praise, but the cop has all the information he needs and puts a bullet through his head. The cop removes his super realistic mask and tells his brother that the job is finished. The blonde boy explains that he saw Kamonohashi for the first time, but he is not like anyone in their family. The boy explains that when Kamonohashi saw the mark that matched his scar, he turned pale. It's clear that he doesn't know what it means, so the brother explains that one day, Kamonohashi will come to appreciate the blood that flows in him from their side of the family. The man then reveals the biggest secret: the ultimate detective, Sherlock Holmes, and the master of crime, James Moriarty. Kamonohashi possesses the blood of them both. Back on the island, we see that the descendant of these two brilliant people is hula hooping. Kamonohashi isn't depressed anymore, and now feels like having a mystery attached to him is kind of interesting. More importantly though, Kamonohashi asks Todo if he will continue helping him. The two are good friends now, so Todoromaru agrees, as he doesn't want to see anything bad happen to him. On a brighter note, Kamonohashi explains that the chef gave him the rest of the black sugar syrup. Todoromaru doesn't want any, but Kamonohashi reveals that he has plenty to share with him. Thanks for watching my recap. Subscribe and ring the notification bell for future parts.